Hi everyone, Luke Everton here. I'm here with Mike Wood, who's the MP for Dudley South. It's also makes him my MP as I live in Brolly Hill, and I'll be interviewing him for Parliament Week 2018. Thanks for having us.
It's really great to talk to you.
The questions I'm about to ask were put together at #DemJam2018, which was a hackathon that brought together the young people of Dudley, which was organised by New Union and Dudley Youth Council in association with Black Country Radio, and it was held in Dudley Council Chambers. The questions are set on 4 themes, which young people of Dudley identified as the most important youth issues, which were mental health, homelessness, crime and employment. And if anyone out there has any views on this interview, you can reach out on Twitter using the hashtag #DemJam. So are you ready, Mark?
Please.
Okay. How do you think the curriculum can be changed or altered to improve awareness of mental health and how to access support?
Yeah, I think mental health care was, it's grown in profile and the way that the NHS treats mental health. I think the care and treatment for children and young people is still not good enough. It's not been good enough for a long time. Now, part of that obviously is going to need extra investments. Over the £20 billion a year extra that's going into the NHS by, I think it's 4 years' time. More of that's going to be spent on mental health. So every year the share of the NHS budget being spent on mental health care is going to increase. But of course there's also a lot that needs to be done, particular for children and young people. So there's an extra £300 million over the next 3 years going into that. And a large part of that is really putting people into schools. So we've got mental health support teams, mental health expert leads in our schools to make sure that schools and colleges, so children and young people, get the care, the support, the consultation and the signposting that they need at an early stage, so that they can get treatment if they need mental health treatment, rather than the condition worsening until they end up in an acute mental health hospital. So we're also, in order to make sure that people aren't waiting longer than they should be, I think that's been a particular problem with CAMS, the service for children and young people. The government's piloting a 4-year standard in some parts of the country now for children and young people to be able to access mental health services. So in terms of the question you're asking about around the curriculum, and by I think it's from autumn next year, every secondary school in the country should have access to mental health care, mental health training. That's been extended to every primary school by 2022, and it means that from 2020, when health education is going to be a core part of the national curriculum, so it will be a legal necessity for all schools to make sure that children and young people get the education in healthcare. That's going to include mental health, both in terms of awareness and how we build resilience to help young people to deal with some of the pressures that can affect people's mental health.
Brilliant, thank you very much. And why do you think that the rate of homelessness is increasing, and what are you going to do to change this?
Yeah, obviously one person without a secure roof over their head is one person too many. This is an issue that I care passionately about and I'm working on in Parliament. So I'm Vice Chairman of the all-party parliamentary group on ending homelessness, and I supported the Homelessness Reduction Act, which came into force earlier this year. Now, that's a new law that the homelessness charity crisis said was the most fundamental change, in a good way, most fundamental change in the law on homelessness in England for over 40 years, and it means that everyone who's at risk of becoming homeless has to have the meaningful support that they need to avoid becoming homeless. And if people are homeless, obviously it's a different type of support, they call it relief, to help them get a roof over their head. So whenever I raise individual cases of rough sleeping around Dudley, particularly in some of our town centres around the borough, both the police and the council tell me in every single case that I've raised with them that actually that person has been offered some accommodation, and it may be hostel accommodation, maybe other accommodation, but for whatever reason has turned it down. But of course, if people do come across people sleeping rough on the streets, then I hope that they raise it with me so that I can take it up with the police and the council and we can try and get something done about it. Or otherwise, anybody can use the StreetLink app on their phone, or the website, or the telephone numbers 0300 500 0914, and that puts rough sleeper directly in touch with the authorities so that we can actually take the practical action to get people who are involuntarily sleeping rough on the streets, make sure that they've got the offer of somewhere to sleep.
That's brilliant, thank you. And how do you think we can deter young people from resorting to crime, and what do you believe influences them?
Well, I think the influences are very varied, but most of it comes down to how people see their role in society. And so I think the challenge is making sure that people appreciate that they have a real stake in the future of the country and of the community, that they are actually an important, in fact central part of that community. And I think part of that is obviously the opportunities that people feel around them in terms of employment and their future success. And of course, as that improves, then people have much more to lose by making the wrong decisions. So I mean, obviously we've got the various campaigns around knife crime. We know that people who carry a knife are by far more likely to be the victims of knife crime than people who don't carry a knife. And it's one of the campaign slogans is choose your life, not a knife. And I think that's obviously an important message, but unless we can actually make young people and other groups that may otherwise feel at the margins of society actually feel that they've got a stake in the future and a stake in our communities, then there's always going to be a risk and a temptation that they get involved, if you like, with the wrong sorts and end up taking those bad decisions that lead to criminal activity, and particularly some of the violent crime that we've tragically seen in our streets over the last few years.
And why do you believe that we have a higher than average youth unemployment in Dudley? And in your role as an MP, what are you going to do to change it?
Well, the Black Country has long had a level of unemployment that's higher than the national average, and so whilst like the rest of the country, the level of unemployment has come down significantly over the last 9 years or so. Obviously, the Black Country is still above that average. Within the Black Country, Dudley is a little lower than most the other boroughs, particularly lower than Wolverhampton and Sandwell. But the kind of factors that mean that the good jobs that we want aren't currently in Dudley in the numbers that we need or would like. I mean, you're looking at particularly around the skills gap that has long existed in the Black Country. We have far more people leaving schools without basic qualifications. We then have fewer people graduating in the Black Country than in most of the rest of the country. And what that means is when businesses are making a decision as to where to set up their premises, one of the key things they look at is what's the workforce going to look like, how are they going to be able to get the workers that they need. And until we address both the issues around skills as well as transport infrastructure and other factors that are so important to the success of a business, then we're not going to get the opportunities on the scale we need them. Now, in terms of the practical action that I'm taking in Dudley South in particular, I campaigned hard for the new enterprise zone, the DY5 enterprise zone on the waterfront in Brierley Hill. The Chancellor signed off on that, when was it, a couple of years ago. So that opened last year. It's now up and running, so the first business is already operating on there. The council project that when that's complete, when that's full, that'll be worth about 7,000 jobs for the area. And so of course that's really important opportunities for young people in particular, and they're good quality jobs we're looking to come into that enterprise zone. Also, I've just held my 4th jobs fair, so I hold jobs and careers fair every autumn. I think we had about 1,000 people attend this year's jobs fair at Brierley Hill Civic, it was about 30 different companies and organisations with jobs and opportunities available, and the aim is very much just to put people who are looking for work or looking for a change of career or possibly training face to face with people who've actually got those vacancies and opportunities. So the feedback we've had from that is really, really good. And then just before the summer I organise a apprenticeship and skills fair, which obviously looks slightly younger audience in particular, so it's particularly school and college leavers, people who may be looking at what are the opportunities that are alternatives to universities that actually provide a really, really good prospect for for really good and strong careers ahead of them. And so whilst fewer people attend those, I think the people who do come along and actually talk with employers, the school, with the colleges and training providers, actually get a huge amount out of it, and hopefully we can help people into what will be a really successful career.
That's brilliant. And some young people have lived and are living in conditions where they don't know where food is coming from for the next day. Poverty can give long-term health effects, including mental health issues. What will you do to prevent this happening for the next generation?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's most basic level, the best route out of poverty for families or for individuals is work. I mean, a good, secure job, being able to know that you've got a reliable income coming in is the best way of making sure that not only can you put food on the table and the basics around obviously paying the bills, the utilities, but also obviously as your income rises, you can hopefully put a bit of money away, save for either the rainy day or for the difficulties that invariably come through most people's lives, and you can actually have some of the luxuries, whether that's the nice television, the telephone, or the holidays. So key part of it has to be making sure that we get those good quality jobs into the area. Of course, where we've got absolute poverty of the kind that you're talking about, where people don't know how they're going to put food on the table, there is social support mechanisms, whether it's through through loans through DWP for short-term crises, whether it's obviously some of the work the number of charity and third sector organisations do to help people in particularly vulnerable situations. I mean, I helped to launch a new charity, launched it in Parliament a few weeks back, Only a Pavement Away, and I mean this particularly works with homeless, ex-offenders, ex-servicemen, people who risk of becoming homeless and their lives falling apart, and actually connects them with job opportunities in hospitality sectors, so restaurants, hotels, pubs, as a way of making sure that people get the experience and the opportunities they need really to turn their lives around at that point before they descend into that level of absolute poverty. That's brilliant.
Thank you very much for the interview, and we'll be watching closely over the next year, and hope we can catch up next year at next Parliament week. Anything else you'd like to add?
No, that's great, Luke. Thanks so much.
Thanks very much.
Thanks.
Just come out of the interview with Mike Wood. It was really good to meet him. I've asked him the questions that we got from the Dem Jam hackathon, and I just want to know how you thought he answered the questions. You can tweet us at #DemJam.